This is the Women in, sorry, this is the Industry 4.0 Club, and where we talk about topics with a focus on technology and manufacturing. This is our weekly Women in Manufacturing live stream, and today we're talking to special guest Erin Carroll. I'm Carol Mitchell-Lin, Industry 4.0 Club co-founder, and for the last 5 years, I've been creating content for Industry 4.0 adoption in manufacturing. And when I'm not supporting my fellow co-founders, I'm a content marketing specialist at Raven AI. First, I'd like to introduce my co-host and fellow Industry 4.0 Club co-founder, Grace Donovan. Hi, Grace.
Hey everyone. Hello. Thanks, Carol. And hi, Erin. Thanks so much for joining. I'm Grace. I am also a co-founder of the Industry 4.0 Club. And when I'm not here on live streams or having discussions with amazing women in manufacturing, I work in business development for a technology startup called Andonics based in Detroit that develops technology for the frontline workforce. Thank you.
Thanks, Grace. Yes, from Seattle, joining us today, we have Erin. Erin, we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Oh, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm really excited about this.
Thank you. And we're excited to have somebody who works on a plant in a factory, also in the area of aerospace. Mm-hmm. So we're really excited to have you joining us as women in manufacturing.
Awesome.
Yes. So welcome. Before we dive in, we'd love for the audience to get to know a little bit about you and your journey to manufacturing.
Yeah, sure. So I have been in aerospace the last 15 years. I've worked my way up through the operations kind of pipeline over the last 15 years. I have a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering technology from Purdue University. And after I graduated, I went right into aerospace. I graduated in December of 2009, which most people can remember.
Great time to graduate.
Yeah, 2009 is
I also graduated in 2009, so
not the best time to be looking for a job. But that said, I have a really big passion for aerospace, the space industry, just anything that flies in general. And I was lucky enough to receive one job offer in 2009, and that job offer actually was in the aerospace industry. And so I moved all the way out to California from Lafayette, Indiana, and became a production supervisor for a company that makes bolts and screws for aircraft. And worked for them for quite a while, and eventually found my way out here into Seattle. So I've been in Seattle for 10 years. Seattle's a great place to be in aerospace. A few miles down the road from Boeing. And I'm currently the plant manager for ThyssenKrupp Aerospace, which helps provide raw material to the Boeing supply chain. And I've been the plant manager here for about 4 years, and currently manage 3 different buildings and about 200 employees. So it's been a really fun opportunity, a really fun job, and I'm looking forward to seeing the growth in the next few years, for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. What prompted your kind of interest in engineering? And I know this because, in one of your podcast episodes, which we'll get into, like, we'd love to promote your podcast. I remember you mentioned that your sister sings for a living.
Yes.
So I know we have like very artistic and then very technical functions within the same family. So can you talk a little bit more about like what sparked your interest to go into engineering?
Yeah. So I'm the oldest.
Okay.
I'm the oldest of 3. And this is going to sound really cheesy, but in the 3rd grade, I had to do a book report on Sally Ride.
Okay.
And I was fascinated by her story, fascinated by her being the first American woman in space. And it stuck with me. And so in 6th grade, I went to space camp. And in 8th grade, I went to space camp again. And in 10th grade, I went to space camp again. And it was definitely, something, a lot of children at one point in their, young lives say they want to be an astronaut, right? Or a doctor or whatever, and, parents thought it was just a phase, and it was not a phase. And that's what drew me to Purdue, right? I really wanted to get an engineering degree and work with or among folks that were really like-minded and understood a passion for, aircraft, spacecraft, really anything that flies. And so I'm kind of living the dream, right? I'm providing material for Boeing and for other different companies. And it's been really kind of cool to see where my material goes on every airplane, right? I think that's a really cool thing about manufacturing, is that you can tangibly see what you make and how it's used in other places.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think it's so special when folks like have convictions from such an early age and are able to like carry them through. And maybe there's something about aerospace, like my little brother has known from the age of 2 that he's going to be a pilot, and he is successfully doing so. Like there is just something that like draws people to this industry. So like when folks tell me they have an interest in aerospace, I'm like, yep, you're in it.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's amazing. And so your plant, ThyssenKrupp, in like in the Seattle area operates 24/7. You said you manage a team of about 200, individuals. And so can you tell us a little bit more about what it's like to manage a plant? What are the main challenges that come with that? And how do automation and the automation of processes help you with that?
Yeah. So because Boeing works 24/7 and we provide material to their supply chain, we are supposed to be on call and available 7 days a week. And we have automated a lot of processes to make that happen. Obviously, I don't want to be here 7 days a week. I don't want other people to be here 7 days a week. We do have a weekend shift that's dedicated to working that Friday, Saturday, Sunday shift to make sure that we have material available. But also we have escalation processes and phone trees and different things. And then we have our ERP system that also manages anything that's emergent that comes through to make sure that the right people see it and that it's processed kind of at the right time. I, as a leader and as someone that is managing the facility, yes, I get phone calls, every once in a while on the weekends if something goes a little sideways. But I think that's part of the responsibility and part of the job that you understand when you take on is you want to make sure that you're there for your team and make sure that the team knows that you're available, if there's an emergency or if there's an issue. The machines and the process itself is not hugely automated, but a lot of the planning and a lot of the internal, material movement, things along those lines is automated. And then, if we have to call anybody in or if there's something that needs to be done on off hours, we have a very easy automated process for that. And it definitely helps me sleep better at night knowing that I have the right group of people that are on call so that I don't get those 2 a.m. phone calls every weekend.
There is a firefighter on staff at all times.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm curious, like how your own leadership style has developed in these 4 years, leading a team that's that large and kind of providing people the support that they need to do their jobs.
Yeah, I have an amazing group of managers. My team that works directly for me, I have 8 direct reports. They all work tirelessly to make the machine shop floor run. And their group below them, the supervisors, we really try to make sure that the leadership is really over communicating with each other. And I always laugh that, and everybody on the floor can validate this. I need a sticker on my hard hat that says, I can't fix what I don't know about. And that's been kind of my mantra in the last 4 years is, look, if there's an issue, if there's a problem, I'm here to help you. I'm here to solve those problems, break down those walls, but I need to know about them first. And there's a leadership structure in place that hopefully allows for those problems to be solved at the right level. And so I really encourage my team to really think critically about their problem that they're facing and work with the other managers, supervisors, leaders on the team to see if there's, some collaboration that can happen or any other resources they can use to help solve those issues. And then come to me with, a possible solution or a possible, purchase or something that we need to buy in order to solve this problem. My leadership style has definitely evolved over the last 15 and definitely the last 4, especially with a lot of the issues that we've been having in aerospace. And I think I'd like to think that I've really matured in dealing a lot with these large, complicated problems, kind of one piece at a time, right? As women, we love to multitask.
Yeah.
And there's a time and a place for that. But I also believe that when you're tackling a really, really difficult problem, it's really important to focus on that problem and make sure that you're communicating with the right group of people and collaborating and over communicating in order to help solve that problem in a way that makes everybody okay with the outcome.
Yeah. The image that comes to mind, I feel like the classic image of an elephant that's broken up into puzzle pieces.
Yes.
Right. Like these are big problems. And oftentimes we're only seeing a specific part of it. And so we need that input from everyone so that we can see, okay, the problem that we're looking at is in fact an elephant versus, someone might be coming to you and saying, no, this problem is like a jigsaw puzzle.
Exactly. Well, it's like, what's a molehill and what's a mountain, right? Yeah. And bring me the mountains. I'll happily, I've been training for a big hike. I'm really excited about it. I'll handle the mountains. Yeah.
And have you found that, I think, taking on that approach of, be sure to tell me, the problem, like I can't fix what I don't know about. How has that impacted the culture? Was that the culture kind of coming into ThyssenKrupp as the plant manager, or is that something that you have kind of been on a personal mission to see through?
It's definitely my mission. I think the team, when I came into ThyssenKrupp in October 2018, and the workforce is amazing. The workforce here has kind of been behind me from the beginning and has supported me. And quite frankly, my executive leadership has been very supportive of me as well. And they're very outspoken and they are not, shy about frustrations or issues that they're having on the floor. And I think, as a plant manager, you get sucked into a lot of meetings and you get sucked into a lot of things that really take up your time. But it's really important to make sure that you have a connection to the shop floor and you have a connection to the people that are actually running those machines for you, and making sure that they trust that they can come to you when they do have a problem and that you're actually going to fix it. And so I really encourage anybody that is in any type of leadership role to make sure that you have that connection with your employees and that trust, and that you actually follow through. And if you can't solve their problem, or that it's not going to be the outcome that you want or that they want, that you still communicate it to them with, the amount of logic and reasoning that you can, given whatever that problem or that circumstance is. Because if you don't have trust both ways, it's going to be really, really hard to really work in a productive environment.
I love it when people talk about trust because it's so important. It's so important. But I feel is oftentimes an element that's overlooked in so many settings, whether that's like an office or whether that's a manufacturing shop floor, because without trust, there is no communication and you're not going to be hearing the information or the problems that you need to hear about to like run an efficient and effective operation. And but building that trust and maintaining that is takes a lot of hard work and follow through, as you mentioned. I think that's like a critical component. Whether it's the outcome they want or not, having that transparency and say like, I followed through, the outcome's maybe not what you wanted, but this is it. Or like we did, and this is the result, like, great job. I think those are things that are really, really important. And I love when people talk about trust. So thank you.
No problem. Yeah, definitely a philosophy of mine for sure.
100%. Oh, Carol, you're on mute.
Your conversation was so interesting. I just left it on mute. I didn't. No, I really wanted to maybe talk about trust and problem solving a little more detail, Erin.
Yeah.
Because I think when there's escalation, when things can escalate quite quickly, without that trust, then you can't resolve it, in a planned and measured way, because it gets in the way, the lack of trust. And how do you approach escalate? Like, there's problem solving, but if there's actually an escalation, something more serious, what is your approach? And we can bring that back in. How much does trust play a factor in that?
Yeah. So, I mean, in my role, I deal with a lot of things that are escalating. Generally, they don't make it to me if they're easily solvable. And so, I define, an escalated problem as, something that's either high visibility with the customer or potentially an HR problem, or something along those lines. And I generally make sure that I have all the facts first. And if something's being escalated, there's generally some emotion that's involved in the problem, or the person that's presenting the problem. Either, an order goes late, or someone's having a disagreement on the floor, or whatever it is. There's generally either some anxiety or some issues along those lines. And so I think it's important that if you're dealing with a situation that's escalating, that you stay as de-escalated as possible with your own emotions, which can be hard. I'm a very empathic person. I take on a lot of emotions of the people around me. And I try to turn that off when I'm dealing with a situation or an individual that's having a really hard time, or trying to solve this huge problem. And making sure that you get all of the facts and data that you can to make a really informed and non-biased decision. And again, when you come with evidence, data, and facts, regardless of if the outcome is what that individual or that person wanted, it's really hard to kind of argue that, right? Yeah. And so I try to take a step back and kind of be as objective as possible, and make sure that I'm explaining the logic and the reasoning in the way that I should, and then letting that person feel their emotions, vent their frustration, and again, make sure that they trust that I did my due diligence and this is the outcome that I came to, because that's really the only way that this situation gets resolved in a way that doesn't damage my relationship with those individuals or that person. They may be upset with me for a little bit, but generally speaking, people are capable of following logic and reasoning once you get a night's sleep, or once you have a cup of tea and kind of take a second to look at things more objectively. So I really encourage anybody that's, again, working in any type of leadership role, be it a lead, a supervisor, or executive, whatever you are, to really take a step back, harness and kind of put down your own emotions and look at things as objectively as possible when you're dealing with a situation that could potentially kind of keep snowballing and keep getting worse if you allow it to do that. And I've had to learn that the hard way a few times in my career, especially when dealing with something that was a little bit more personal to me. And it never works out the way that you want it to. You really need to make sure that you're using evidence, data, and facts to drive the decision making for the business. Because in the end of the day, we're all trying to manage the business. We're all trying to run a business and provide for our customers and provide for our workforce. Mm-hmm. And that's what our goal should be at the end of the day, is making sure that we're the right support system for that.
Yeah, and how like each little piece fits into that. So like you're saying, we all have ultimately the same goal, but kind of priorities within that goal can vary, and that sometimes leads to conflict.
Yeah.
But I think you mentioned something very critical there, which is understanding the why a decision was made, and understanding that why is. I think it enables people to then set aside their emotions and say, okay, like I understand that logic, even if I might not agree with it, but having that just certainty and reassurance and context, I think it makes it easier to kind of separate those emotions at times. It's never easy, but the why is very important.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, when you're approaching the hiring and hiring process and deciding who would be somebody suitable for the organization, how is that as a challenge for you over the last 2 years and looking forward in the future with the general supply chain issues? How have you been approaching the hiring?
I mean, I think we're tight like every other industry right now. The labor market is very tight. Seattle specifically is a very tight labor market. We've got Amazon down the street. We've got the tech giants that are all in downtown Seattle. We've got a huge Boeing supply chain that's local to this area that's also poaching a lot of the machinists and a lot of the skilled workforce that we're also looking for. And so the last 2 years have been very difficult for the aerospace industry, and we definitely saw a downturn in the last few years. Thankfully, we're starting to see growth again, and we want to be ready for that. And so I think just like every other facility that's part of the aerospace supply chain, be it Boeing, Airbus, Bombardier, wherever you are, labor is going to be a huge part of that. And so staying ahead of that is a huge kind of priority for us. And you can hire as many people as you can, but if you don't retain them, then there's no benefit to that. And so we've really put a priority on company culture and morale and engagement to make sure that we're focusing on bringing in the right talent and then retaining that talent. And, obviously wages and benefits are the easiest thing to do, but they're not always the reason people stay in a role, right? And so, making sure that you have really good, team building activities, again, trust and communication with the leadership team, and good work-life balance, making sure your overtime isn't getting too crazy, all of, making sure your machines are working properly and making sure that there's good ergonomics for your workforce to make sure they're operating safely. All of that plays into a part in employee retention. And I think in any tight labor market like we're in right now, if you are running a business, if you own a business, if you're a leader in any business, those are the things that you really need to be focusing on, because it's hard enough to get the talent in the door. I think it's a lot more difficult to keep the right talent working for you in the long term. And you want people with the right attitude, and you want people that are positive and that will come to work on time and all of those great things. And I think those things are easy to identify, over time. But then the hard work begins on making sure that they're seeing growth and that they can see, progressive leadership opportunities or skill set opportunities. And all of that plays into a part of making sure that we're staying ahead of our planning process, making sure that we're shipping all of our product out on time, making sure that we have a satisfied customer. Ultimately, it's the people that make the business run, and all of those people need to be satisfied in what they do to make sure that, all of these processes are working in tandem to get parts from the very beginning of the process all the way out the shipping door into the customer. So I think the last 2 years, if you didn't spend it reflecting and maybe investing a little bit in your facilities, that's going to be to your detriment in this type of market. So, it's definitely something that we've been looking into, and it's something that I think will benefit us in the long run.
So to that point, I'm curious how kind of you were able to evolve and adapt, especially with like the big shift that we went through over the past 2 years. Do you have any kind of practical examples of what ThyssenKrupp did to kind of retain folks and make them feel safe, and of course, like have room to grow during like the past 2 years, which were very tumultuous for a lot of folks?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our corporate office is now remote, right? That's a big culture shift for us, and I think a lot of other larger companies. And even at the plant level, we've been able to accommodate some of that as well. And I think the other thing is, again, managing our overtime, managing our hourly folks to make sure they have the same work-life balance that the salary folks do, and not, burning anybody out or stressing anybody out too much. I think, again, in this type of labor environment, they're not going to sit and put up with that. And so that's been a huge thing. And I think safety, employee safety, and we've had some, we've had a lot of COVID outbreaks here in Seattle, and so making sure that, again, your team is over communicates what we're doing about that, how we're following all of our policies to keep everybody safe. I think that's something that we've done over the last 2 years that's been received relatively well. And the the other thing too with the last 2 years has really shown is that people want to work, right? They want to work in a facility where they like the people that they're working with. They enjoy the environment that they're working in, which is hard when you're working in a warehouse. You're working, I'm working loud machines, hot in the summers, cold in the winters. And so finding ways, different heaters and different fans, different things to, again, make things a little bit more comfortable, so that people want to come to work, right? Because those are the people that are going to grow your business and become future leaders in the company. So I think that's been a big lesson over the last 2 years is, people aren't going to put up with less than ideal work environments anymore, which is great. Honestly, I don't want to either.
Specifically, Erin, thanks very much for that. I'd like to know a little bit more, maybe about what you're doing for the women that are working at your organization, as well as the women that are on the front line as well.
Yeah. So we have several women on our shop floor. We have several machine operators on our shop floor, quality inspectors on our shop floor. It's great to see. I mean, I know ThyssenKrupp's done a pretty good job of making sure that we've got, a diverse workforce. And a lot of our executives and a lot of our leaders at the corporate office are women as well. And it's always great to go down and, you just share eye contact with someone, right? And it's like, yeah, we've got it. It's always funny to run into
Solidarity.
Little solidarity. Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of solidarity. And I think, seeing a woman in charge of the plant is very encouraging for the other women in manufacturing on the shop floor and even in the executive suites. I think it's really a positive thing to see. We are capable. We're capable of doing anything that the boys can do. And it's always been fun. And even little things like, and I don't know if you can say tampons on a live webcast, but, providing.
You just did. We're good.
But sanitary products and like making sure that people are that women are comfortable with the different sanitary products that we provide for, in the bathrooms and making sure that they're comfortable and making sure that, again, building that trust with that group of people to make sure that they're not being discriminated against in any way. They're not being treated any differently in any way. I think that that's something that I've driven as a leader, and that everybody, man or woman, you need to make sure that the people that are working for you have the correct knowledge, skills, and abilities to be able to do that, and that their gender should play no part in, how you measure their performance.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that kind of anecdote like tracks really well too with your inspiration from Sally Ride, right?
Yeah.
Making sure that you have the products that you need. That
Yeah,
your
I don't need
team,
100 of them.
not
That's a good
100,
point. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you might know a little
Not
better, but
100. Yeah.
those like basic needs are covered. And I know in a lot of our discussions kind of in this room with Carol, we've heard stories of folks that had to be like, okay, are we sure that, the women have a bathroom, or like, are everyone's basic needs being accommodated, because we are no longer a monolith. I think especially going forward and like promoting more diverse workplace, there are like more considerations to take into account, but I think it makes it a better place for everyone overall. So that's really great to hear.
Yeah.
I do want to take some questions from the audience since we have some great engagement. We got some questions coming in from Sean, Burks, Mike, and David Kirkdorfer. Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and pin this comment. But since we're talking about talent, question on recruiting. Does manufacturing need to look wider afield for potential new employees? If so, what characteristics are key to make new manufacturing employees?
Good question. I do think manufacturing does need to look a little bit wider. There are definitely a lot of transferable skills in other areas that can 100% apply to manufacturing. Attention to detail, reading, the ability to read drawings, ability to, having a mechanical ability of any sort can 100% apply to manufacturing. And I do think that, recruiters and hiring managers need to make sure that they're getting a little more creative with how they find and attract labor. If we stick with kind of the normal, flow of where we're looking, I don't think we're going to be able to fill the demand that's needed in the next, 5 years as we start to see aerospace grow again, which is a little bit concerning. And so, yeah, I think we definitely need to look wider and be a little bit smarter about our job descriptions and make sure that our job descriptions actually match the skills that we're looking for, and we're not being over specific on what those requirements are. As far as what characteristics that are key, again, anybody that has an attention to detail, that's a really great start, right? I can teach somebody how to operate a machine. I can teach somebody kind of the more technical side of how to operate some type of device on the manufacturing floor. I think the biggest things are, having a really positive attitude, having patience and flexibility, and then making sure that they understand, we're making aircraft, we're making spacecraft, we're making things that could potentially do serious harm to human beings if we are not paying attention. And so, and that's something that I talk about every week with all of our new employees when they start is, we make airplane parts, and if we don't make them correctly, that could have very serious outcomes. And so, as far as the biggest characteristics for making a new manufacturing employee is making sure that they very much understand that, and then make sure that they take a lot of pride in what they do, what they make, who they work for, because that will then carry that full company culture that you're looking for. And again, make sure that there's a lot of trust both among the team and then among the leadership as well.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you, David, for your question. So we were, discussing kind of like in tandem, the labor market, getting folks in the door, but also making sure that they're retaining, and kind of diving in a little bit to, what makes a great manufacturing employee. And Carol brought up, how many folks on the shop floor are women. And that's one thing, that we've, again, discussed a lot in this room and spent some time last week discussing as well, focusing on just like burnout and sometimes the way, just the need for flexible schedules. And I know that's something that you mentioned as well, that, leadership has gone fully remote and you've made some accommodations for folks on the front line as well. So I'm curious to know what kind of accommodations you've made, because one thing that the Deloitte study called Women at Work 2022, A Global Outlook. We highly recommend everyone go check it out. It says that folks, especially women who request like flexible time off, don't often feel comfortable talking about their challenges with the workplace. And I think that ties in really well with, of course, like your mantra of like, I can't fix something I don't know about, right? So it really all comes together. And how do you make this like a workplace that's very accommodating, and again, where people feel comfortable like requesting accommodations if they need to kind of step back and take some time. So I know that was a very big, hairy question. So let me know if I can repeat myself. But
yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, I have a very healthy and good working relationship with my HR manager. She and I can basically finish each other's sentences at this point. And, you know, anytime that we're talking about accommodating something that's a little bit out of the ordinary, I always want to make sure that I run it through her to make sure everything's kind of kosher on the legal level and everything like that. And I also need to remember as a plant manager that whatever I do to accommodate for one person, I have to be ready and willing to accommodate for somebody else. But that being said, again, in the last 2 years, what I would have thought was a reasonable accommodation 3 years ago is a heck of a lot different than what I think is a reasonable accommodation now. You know, work from home, especially on a shop floor, you know, and manufacturing environment wasn't even discussed.
Yeah, it's still difficult.
And it's still difficult, you know, like you can't run a machine from home, right?
Not yet, anyway.
You still need people that come into work and actually operate equipment. And you know, obviously as leaders, I'm not going to be an absent leader, right? But that being said, I think there's definitely a much higher tolerance for people that need a little bit of a break for their mental health, or they need to adjust their work schedule for a week to, you know, accommodate some type of childcare situation or something along those lines. And I know I really do my best, and I know, you know, ThyssenKrupp as a whole does their best to make sure that we're accommodating as much as possible. Because again, going back to trust, you know, that's how you build an engaged and a trustful workplace, is making sure that you're treating human beings like human beings. You know, we're not robots. We're not people, you know, we're not able to operate the same way every day. And our mental health can be different on an hourly basis sometimes. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that and make sure that your policies and your procedures for your facilities are reflective of what you're willing to accommodate. You know, if you know, I have office jobs here in my facility, and you know, if someone has an injury or if someone has a problem, we all have laptops, right? There is an ability to do some of this work remotely, and so it just depends on what your job function is and your job title is, and it's really a case by case of, you know, what can I accommodate, and if I accommodate it, am I willing to do that for others as well? It is really the baseline of my decision making. And generally speaking, it is my decision. If there's any accommodation on the floor, I generally ask to be involved just to make sure, again, there's consistency across the entire campus. Because the minute that there is any sort of inconsistency, in that kind of stuff, that's when we start talking about escalating. And we don't want to go there. So, but it's definitely been a challenge and a learning experience even for myself as I've gone through the last couple of years, as far as making sure that women and men on the shop floor are working in a good space, and making sure that if they do need some type of adjustment, that we're willing to give it to them.
Thank you. And so before I move on to my next question, I do want to highlight this question coming in from Mike. What are some of the key technology improvements that you've made in your environment? Because that can affect, of course, a lot of these accommodations. You're talking automation. There's a number of ways that this could go.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, up until 2 years ago, I had a desktop. And so even just on the IT side, you know, the VPNs and the different laptop skills, the Office 365, you know, Teams, all of that stuff became a lot more important in the last couple of years. And that alone has kind of changed the game when it comes to remote work and even working in the facility, especially, at the height of the pandemic when we couldn't even have in-person meetings, and we're doing everything remotely, even though the person I'm trying to talk to is down the hall. And so, the IT side of that is a huge key part of it. And then as far as technology goes, I think, and again, to kind of reference what I said earlier, if you weren't making technological improvements during the downturn, you're going to be behind. And so, looking at new equipment, looking at, robotics or any type of automation, looking at, making sure that your ERP system is up to date, looking at making sure that your, just all of the mechanical, electrical systems, pneumatic, all of your systems are up to date and using the most up-to-date technology. And if you haven't invested in that, I highly suggest that you do that right now. It will pay you back so quickly. And I don't think a lot of companies really understand, the return on investment on technology right now, I think is going to be huge, because at least in aerospace, I just see the growth starting again, and you don't want to be caught with, without those advancements in technology in the last 3 to 5 years. I know we've been investing in it, and I know that, there's plenty of other aerospace companies in the area that have been investing in themselves and in their workforce and in their IT systems. And I think it's going to pay back very, very quickly.
Right. Love that. Yes. Very forward thinking. And I think, and that helps too. Like, one of the things that we discuss here regularly is how are we changing the perception of manufacturing from like dirty, dangerous, and dull to something that is like cool, awesome, clean, technologically advanced, right? Like, so just highlighting the importance of kind of investing in that new technology, and whether that's remote tools that like folks who work in an office have access to, or tools on the shop floor, all of those are really important to keep people connected and moving forward. And speaking of like technology that we're using to communicate right now, I know you have a podcast called Leading Like Her, and that is the inspiration for the title of our show today. But I want to ask, what inspired you to start that podcast, and what impact do you want it to have?
Yeah, so I started Leading Like Her in October of last year after 2 years at home in the pandemic, literally coming to work, going home, eating dinner, going to bed, right? Lots of YouTube. And I was really looking for a creative outlet and looking for a way to kind of share my stories and my kind of point of view. And I was actually looking at hiring someone here to work for me. And I looked at a lot of resumes, and I probably looked at 50 to 100 resumes, and not a single woman applied. Not even just didn't get an interview, didn't apply. And it ticked me off. Why? I'm not actively looking for a woman, but it's really disappointing that no women even applied. And that kind of inspired me to look at, starting a podcast to really start encouraging women to look into leadership roles. And what was really embarrassing was that I took to LinkedIn, because I said, I need to have guests on my show and talk about leadership. And I looked at my own LinkedIn network, and my own LinkedIn network was very white and very male, which, if you think about it, makes sense, because that's who I work with every day. And so I was like, I need to actively expand my network and have a more diverse network, both in life and on LinkedIn. And so it was a wake-up call for me to make sure that I'm giving opportunities to other women, and that I'm sharing my stories so that other women understand and can relate to kind of the difficulties of being a female leader. And so I started the show. Actually, episode 50 will be out next week. But it's really, it's not solely dedicated to manufacturing. I look at all different industries, and quite frankly, I just look and see has a really interesting story. And I've had different VPs from VPs of marketing. I've had authors. My episode that dropped yesterday actually is in manufacturing. She's the CEO of the Pacific Northwest Aerospace Alliance. Nikki Malcolm, she's awesome. But I really just like to share the advice of women that are breaking those glass ceilings and inspire other women to apply. There's nothing wrong with applying for a leadership role. Whether you get it or not, you're going to learn something. And I think that that's something that we need to take more to heart than we do right now.
100%. I feel like that was the best career advice I got in college, was just apply. Even if you might have self-doubt, and I think, women tend to look, oh, do I have all of these qualifications? And even subtle things in wording of job applications can kind of, I think, be a deterrent or no. Yeah. But I just remember getting that advice from mentor, like, what's the worst that could happen? Is they're going to tell you no, but you tried. And like, you could be a dark horse candidate.
Yeah.
And that's how I got my first job out of college. And it was amazing. So
yeah,
I just absolutely want to echo that advice.
Absolutely. That. And I think, my other soapbox is networking, right?
Yeah.
You never know where your next opportunity is going to come from. And the larger you expand your network, the more connections you have, the more opportunities that are going to come to you in the future. And, get on LinkedIn and click connect on 5 people that inspire you. You never know. They may accept that connection and you may have a conversation in the future.
And tell them that, tell them why you're,
tell them why you're connecting. Hi, I followed you for a while. I think you're really inspiring. I'd love to get you on Zoom, or if you're local, let's grab a coffee and just say hello. I mean, I've cold emailed probably 20 or 30 women on LinkedIn, and almost all of them have agreed to come on my podcast. People like talking about themselves. They like sharing advice and lessons learned, and especially on a topic that they're really passionate about. And that's what I've found. So that's my other soapbox moment. Get out there and network.
One of your podcasts from last week that I listened to, Networking for Introverts.
Yes.
I really liked it as a self-professed introvert. And I wanted to know, how can you take that advice for networking for introverts?
Yes.
And really take it and expand it to women who are leaders in manufacturing, or who want to go into leadership roles, but they're introverts and they might be hesitant for whatever reason. What would you suggest to them, or what kind of tips?
Yeah. So I'm also an introvert. And just because I'm an introvert doesn't mean I hate people. I get on my, God, you found all my soapbox moments, ladies. Being an introvert just means that being around people drains you as opposed to recharges you. And I was just at a conference on last Friday. I was, speaking in front of over 200 women, and it was a 12-hour day. It was a long day. And I made sure that I did not have any plans that Saturday, because I was exhausted, right? And needed some time alone to read my Kindle, to hike a mountain, to recharge. And so I think it's only natural for introverts to need a little bit more self-care and a little bit more time. But I don't think that exempts us from networking or from growth. I am outspoken. I am opinionated. I do not want to allow other people to shape my future. I just need a door that I can close every once in a while, right? To take a deep breath and kind of regather myself. I want to kind of change this narrative that all introverts are shy, because in my opinion, that's not always the case. It can be the case. And a lot of people are a little bit more soft-spoken and a little more thoughtful. And I think we really need to understand, as leaders, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you need to look at those people that only speak when they have something important to say, and give them that same opportunity for growth and for leadership as someone that is constantly talking, right? Mm-hmm. And I think I think we're getting there. I see a lot more on social media about being an introvert. I see a lot more different, webinars and classes and things like that kind of help people cope with, being someone that manages a lot of people and has to be on and talk all day and hasn't worked from home this entire pandemic. There's definitely, the hour after I get home after work every day that I just needed a minute to decompress. And so for anybody out there that may be on a little bit more of the introverted side, building your network through LinkedIn, you can do at home by yourself. There's no excuse. Going out and meeting a mentor or someone that you used to work with for coffee is a little bit less draining than meeting somebody new, right? And so just understanding kind of where you're at mentally, and then using the energy that you do have to grow that network and grow that career is really the advice that I would give. Because, if you want it, you have to work for it.
Cue a Britney Spears song in my head.
Yes. Yes.
I think so as the extrovert here in the room, I still think that's fantastic advice for people like me who get recharged, being around people. But, even just saying yes to a lot of things, everyone needs that time to kind of recharge and refocus. And it's important whether or not that's just for energy preservation, self-care, or just to not feel kind of exhausted and spread too thin.
Exactly.
That's really great advice. Mm-hmm. But you mentioned mentors, and we have just about 10 minutes left in today's live stream. So I wanted to know, kind of in your experience, what mentors in school or in college or in the workforce left an impression on you, helped you, reach for your goals and achieve your goals, and that ultimately led you to where you are now, and will hopefully lead you, or help you along the way as you continue to develop your career.
Yeah, I've had several. Obviously it starts with my parents. My parents paid for space camp 4 times.
I need to know more about space camp later, sidebar.
Yeah, we'll do that later. But if you are a parent, and whatever your financial means are, just know that just encouraging and inspiring your children to go after what they want to go after and not putting limits on them, it starts there. And I was very lucky that I had parents that were very supportive of what I wanted to do. And then, I had a hard time in college. I was born and raised in northern New Jersey and moved at 17 out to Indiana, 800 miles away. And I actually had to start college over. I failed out the first time and had to go back and kind of figure out what it meant to study and what it meant to manage my time. And I ended up finding a professor there, Professor Denton, who was very inspirational and kind of just guided me with a little bit of tough love to make sure that I was doing what I needed to do. Because again, I was one of very few women in that major, and she was my only female professor, and I really kind of connected with her. And she's still there. She's running, a female-led engineering group, and it's been really cool to see from afar. And then kind of in my professional career, about 10 years ago, I had a boss. He was a director of operations at a facility that I worked for here in Seattle. It was my first gig here in Seattle. His name was Craig, and he really shaped me into the operations leader that I am right now. That first year in Seattle, I was very new. I was, 24 years old, managing, 60 people, most of them older than me, or all of them older than me, right? And that's a tough situation to be in if you don't have the right leadership and the right guidance. And I was, again, very lucky to have him for a year, but then we kept in touch. We parted ways. But over the last 10 years, he's kept in touch with me. How are you doing? Let's grab some coffee. If you have any questions. I ended up working for him again later on in my career, and we're still in touch to this day. I texted him yesterday, and he's been very, very instrumental in how I've grown as a leader. his favorite line, if I'm coming to him and venting to him about a problem
Mhm.
that I have, his favorite line is, "Oh, it sounds like a leadership problem." Right? And
Is everything a leadership problem?
right, because everything's a leadership problem. And it used to really tick me off. Like, no, like this isn't, but it really is, right? At the end of the day, it's my job to solve the problems. And whether or not I'm frustrated with what I have to deal with, it's still something I have to deal with, right? And so it's a good reminder that I have in my head of like, no, you're the leader of this facility, and if there's a problem either upstream or downstream, it's your responsibility to find a way to solve it in a way that maintains the integrity of the plant. And so that's someone that I've been really, really inspired by, and I've had a lot of mentors and advocates over the years, men and women, and I've been very lucky to be given a lot of these opportunities that have led me here into this seat as plant manager. And I really hope with the podcast and then even professionally outside of that show that I have the opportunity to pay it forward.
That's amazing. And I just want to thank you so much for just even mentioning some of those trials that are involved, like failing out of college the first year. Like failure is tough, but it's such an important lesson to learn. Like I feel that deeply. Is that they're important lessons to learn. They're really hard. They can be a real blow, but I think it ultimately lends so much to a person's resilience. And as long as you're failing forward, that's really the important thing, right? Don't let that just keep you where you're at. And that you pick yourself up, learn from it, and keep moving forward. And just, as you mentioned, having, mentors and advocates, right? Both men and women that are going to speak up for you, your professor, right? That gave you the tough love that you needed. All of those roles that we can identify in our own lives, and then also be that person to others are really important. So thank you. That was a lovely note to kind of bring this to a close. So Carol, I don't know if you have any final comments, but this has been a wonderful conversation. I am very energized now. This is the extrovert in me coming out.
I love it.
My final takeaway really, I don't think it's the first time it's been our conversation around trust and building trust with everyone we work with, almost as an investment in the future. As you said, if there's any problems or escalations, if you build on the trust in the relationship, when those times come, then it's far easier to manage them and to recover from them. So I really liked that part of our conversation today, Erin, and I'll definitely take that with me.
I love it. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me. This has been wonderful. I can't thank you guys enough. I love this kind of stuff. And I love that you're spreading your message. This is such a great platform for that.
Thank you. We enjoy it. And having guests like you is just it's what we're in it for. So
I love it. Awesome.
Did you have anything, Grace, that you wanted to stress from today or that is taking you away?
I think really, again, understanding what it takes to be a good leader, and Erin's, leadership lessons, is it a leadership problem? How can we continually work for solutions, but also again, promote and foster those environments of trust that we get the information that we need in order to make things better. That's, one thing that I'm always excited to talk about. So that's, I think, a big takeaway from today's conversation. And just, of course, would encourage everyone who is listening in either now or in the future to go ahead and subscribe to Leading Like Her for more of those insights in the future.
Thank you so much. And Erin, would you like the last word for today?
Sure. Like I said, Grace mentioned, my podcast is Leading Like Her. It's on Apple, it's on Spotify, it's on Google. But taking my own advice, if you are listening to this webcast, add me on LinkedIn. I would love to expand my network and love to grow it and share some more thoughts and ideas with everyone. And again, advocate for the women in your facility, advocate for the men in your facility, and make sure that you're building that trust and that relationship with your employees.
Excellent. Erin, we really appreciate your knowledge and experience. And by continuing to help women in leadership positions be more valuable, we really appreciate that. And we thank you to everyone who's joined us in the audience today. And if you like conversations like this, look out for more LinkedIn Live shows. And also you will find us from time to time on the Clubhouse app. And normally our rooms start at 12:30. Today we're a little early. And there are other Industry 4.0 rooms also Monday to Thursday that start at 12:30, except our fireside chat starts at 11:30 a.m. And we'll finish off for today, and I wish you all a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Thanks, Erin.